Hey, Jim Kennett here. I want to talk to you a little bit about how easy it is to fly to the wonderful destination of Cuba. Once you book your tickets, which we booked with Southwest Airlines from St. Louis International Airport to Fort Lauderdale, Florida. Once you get your tickets booked, you have to apply for a visa, which usually costs around $50. And you have to have one of 12 reasons to fly to Cuba. You just can't like book your tickets and say, hey, I'm here. You have to have a reason to go there. So that's very important. So once you receive your visa and it's approved, you're on your way. One thing we noticed when we flew into Fort Lauderdale was that there was not many Americans on board. So it kind of made us a little bit nervous, and we were kind of wondering why. But there was just people that were just wanting to go back home that were visiting America. So once you book your flight and you're on your way and you got your visa and your passport, you go through customs, which usually takes about 15 or 20 minutes, and then they look over your visa and you're pretty much on your way. One thing I would highly recommend is having somebody at the airport pre-booked to give you a ride to downtown Havana, Cuba, because that way you're not scrambling around at the airport. There's a lot of cabbies out there, and they charge exuberant prices, to take you to downtown. If you have this all pre-planned and scheduled, you'll pay probably half of the amount that they normally would charge. So my recommendation is to have all that done in advance. Staying at the Bread and Breakfast was a great choice because we got to learn about the culture of the people, and the people we stayed with were very inviting. And we just really enjoyed talking to them. And they also gave us tips on the do's and don'ts in Cuba. So we felt like it was a very good choice. And they made sure that we had great lodging, and we chose air conditioning, which I highly recommend that if you go to Cuba in the summertime, because it's 90 degrees, and a lot of the places that are online that you book do not have air conditioning. So you want to make it a point to pick a place and suggest and find out if they have air conditioning, and you'll be a lot cooler and you'll sleep so much better. Anyway, moving on to our trip, we took a one-day excursion over to the beach, and it was awesome driving in a 1954 Chevy. And the guy that we hired pretty much stayed with us all day. He slept in his car, and we were there for like 3 or 4 hours. And then when we were ready to go, all we had to do was pick up the cell phone and call him. He was right there at the curb for us, and he picked us up and took us back to the Bread and Breakfast. And the drive back and forth was so beautiful. I mean, we saw a little bit of the countryside, and we saw people working in the fields, and it was a great experience. This is a view from the top of one of Havana's newest hotels. It has a great panoramic view of all the historical buildings, including the Capitol, the Opera House, and also the City Square. It's also a great place just to sit and unwind, have a drink, and watch an awesome sunset over the ocean. Once it gets dark, the lights of the city just come alive. And it's also really cool to sit and watch all the old vintage cars that drive down the street. Each individual owner has to take care of their vehicles and maintain them with all their old vintage tools. When I went there, I thought I'd only see a couple hundred, but we saw thousands. Another question people asked us was about the money exchange from American money to Cuba currency. Well, I suggest going to a local bank there in Havana and exchange your money there rather than doing it at the airport. We found a place that was in a hotel that was recommended to us by our host of our Bread and Breakfast, and they told us that the exchange rate was very good there, so we took their advice and we exchanged our money. As we were walking around the streets of old Havana, we had noticed a lot of really handmade items that we really were wanting to buy, and the prices on them were really reasonable. I picked up this really cool teapot that was made out of clay and handmade, and it's got Cuba right there on it, and it was only a small price. And I had to ask the guy a couple times how much that was, and I only wish I would have picked up 3 or 4 of them for some of my friends. But the people on the streets are so friendly and it's very safe there. We ran into this one guy and he told us a story about a friend of his that got caught stealing some candy. And he was sentenced to 1 year hard labor in Cuba in the prison. And he had to sleep on the floor every night. So the place is really safe and they really, really tend to watch everybody. And, if you get caught with a knife or a gun, you could get up to 25 or 30 years just for carrying it. And we also found a story out that was really funny that a guy said that if you kill a cow, you can get 25 years in prison just for killing your own cow that you own. We thought that was really interesting. Apparently you have to go through the government to be able to butcher or kill a cow. I also want to add that if you are a professional photographer, you will have a field day photographing in this location. There are so many doorways and windows and just old scene and doing portraits on the streets of people with their way of life. And it was a great experience for me as a professional photographer to go capture some awesome images for my friends and family and others so they can enjoy the experience that I had in Cuba. So I highly recommend just doing a lot of walking and searching for those out-of-the-way places that people are working in the streets. We saw a guy sewing with a sewing machine right in the middle of the street. He was sewing leather shoes together for somebody. My take after traveling there was I was so amazed how people just do not talk on their cell phones. I mean, it was very rare when we were walking down the street to see anybody talking on a cell phone. That was so different than what we're used to seeing here in the United States because people are always tied to their phones. Whether you're driving in a car or if you're walking on the street, people are just on their phones. Where in Cuba, people tend to just talk to each other the old-fashioned way, communication, and kind of a lost art here in the United States. Dining there in Cuba, we found it was very reasonable to eat, whether it was lunch, dinner, breakfast. The average cost of our meals was anywhere between $5 and $10 US, which, was amazing. I'm so used to paying larger prices here in the United States. And in Cuba, you can eat very well for a lot less. Drinks average for a beer was about $1 a piece. I think the most we ever paid was $2. And so everything is very reasonable. Soda, candy bars. I couldn't believe it, how the prices seemed like they were back in time, back in the 60s or 50s maybe even. But that's just their way of life, and they don't have such a high markup on their products. They just love Americans, and I think it's because they love having us in their country, and they want to showcase their lifestyle and show us that they are a great country. And I can't express this more than enough that we really enjoyed talking to people one-on-one. They were so friendly and outgoing, and they explained us about their lives. And one thing you don't want to forget when you go to Cuba is to pick up a box of their awesome cigars. They are fantastic. One thing we learned from traveling to this wonderful destination of Cuba was how friendly the people were there and how very, very safe it was there. I would like to encourage you to book a trip to this fantastic destination as soon as possible. And be sure to check with all the regulations and the rules before you book the trip to make sure you have everything in line. So I think it's going to become the next travel hotspot for Americans and everybody alike to travel to this great destination of Cuba. I'm looking forward to going back many, many times. Thank you for watching this video, and I hope you have a wonderfully blessed day.